It was a cold, silent night in Ouagadougou. The wind blew through the trees like whispers of danger, but most of the city slept peacefully. All the lights in the presidential palace were off. Only the soft red light from the tall tower blinked slowly in the dark sky. At exactly 3 a.m., President Ibrahim Traoré sat up in bed with a jolt. Rethawing. His private phone, the red one that never rang unless there was serious trouble, was buzzing loudly beside him. His heart pounded. He grabbed it. "Hello," he whispered, his voice tense. "It's Colonel Abu, sir," came the shaky voice from the other end. "It's him. He's doing it. General Maurice Doumbié has launched the coup. He's using the 3rd Battalion. They're already moving toward the palace." President Traoré closed his eyes. He had trusted Doumbié with everything. His voice was calm but strong. "Activate Protocol Omega now." "Yes, Mr. President." The line went dead. As guards rushed into his bedroom, President Traoré was already slipping on his boots and grabbing a sealed black envelope from under his bed. He looked around the room once more. It might be his last time there. He gave one sharp order: "Wake Major Sankara. Tell him we move in 5 minutes." His guards nodded and rushed out. But Traoré didn't leave right away. Instead, he stood still for a moment, thinking. His mind traveled back 3 days earlier, to the moment everything changed. It was a quiet afternoon when Traoré received a strange report from his intelligence chief. "There's something odd about General Doumbié, sir," the chief had said. "He's been meeting secretly with people from the French embassy, too many times. And money has been moving in and out of hidden bank accounts under his name." Traoré couldn't believe it at first. Not Maurice. He was his most trusted man. His right-hand general. But the evidence was clear. Doumbié had agreed to betray the country. In return, he would become president, and the French would get back all the things Traoré had taken from them: gold mines, oil deals, and power. Traoré had smiled that day, though his heart was breaking. He gave only one instruction: "Prepare a trap. We must let the traitor walk straight into it." Now, the trap was about to snap shut. In the darkness of the palace, alarms started to ring quietly, only heard in hidden hallways. Guards escorted President Traoré through a bookcase in the library. It opened slowly, revealing a secret tunnel lit with green lights. As he stepped inside, he gave his final order before vanishing. "Lock the palace. Leave it empty. Let them take dust, not power." The door shut behind him. Outside, the night was no longer quiet. Far down the main road, General Doumbié stood tall in a military truck. He wore his shining green uniform and a red beret. His voice roared through a walkie-talkie. "Move. The palace is within reach. President Traoré will be in chains by sunrise." The 3rd Battalion, strong and trained, followed him. But they didn't know what was inside their guns. Back in the tunnel, President Traoré walked quickly, his face set like stone. By his side was Major Sankara, his most loyal soldier. "They're almost here, sir," Sankara said. "I know," Traoré replied. "But let him come. That's part of the plan." "Do they know their rifles are loaded with blank bullets?" Sankara asked. Traoré shook his head. "No. That's the beauty of it." Major Sankara smiled. "Then they are walking into a shadow." As the sun began to rise, the city changed. Helicopters circled above. People woke up to the sound of boots marching. But the palace was silent. Doumbié kicked open the main doors. No guards. No staff. No Traoré. He stood in the grand hallway, confused. Then he smiled. "We've won," he told his men. "Start preparing my speech." But he didn't know. President Traoré was watching everything. Deep underground, in a hidden command center, giant screens showed live feeds from hidden cameras placed all over the palace and city. Sankara pointed to one of the screens. "Sir, the French embassy is moving. Cars going in and out. Lights flashing. Something's happening there." Traoré narrowed his eyes. "It's a foreign-backed coup. Just as we feared." He looked at the clock. It was 5:30 a.m. "It's time," he said softly. "Let's show the people who Doumbié really is." Meanwhile, Doumbié stood in front of a camera inside the presidential hall. He wore his medals proudly. Behind him, a fake flag of the new government hung. He raised his chin. "My name is General Maurice Doumbié, and I come to you not as a traitor, but as a savior of our nation. Today, the army has taken control under the National Committee for Salvation." But as his speech began to go live, something unexpected started happening. People across the city began getting messages on their phones. Not just any messages, real proof. Videos. Voice recordings. Documents. Traoré's team had released it all. Messages between Doumbié and foreign agents. His secret bank accounts in Paris. Photos of him meeting in shadows. The people's trust began to melt like ice under fire. At 6 a.m., the city that had been quiet started to shake. Not with bombs, not with guns. With anger. Anger in the hearts of the people. Anger in the eyes of young soldiers who began asking questions. And above all, a storm was coming for Doumbié. But he still didn't know it. He thought the palace was his. He thought victory was near. He didn't know. He was already a prisoner. The morning sun rose slowly over Ouagadougou, but something was strange in the air. The streets were quiet, too quiet. Normally, by now, you would hear shopkeepers calling out, children playing in the streets, and radios singing from windows. But this morning, people were glued to their phones. Messages were pouring in like rain. And the messages told a story more shocking than any they had ever heard. General Doumbié was a traitor. In one video, Doumbié sat in a dark hotel room whispering to a white man in a French suit. In another, he talked about how they would take back control and remove Traoré quickly. There were pictures of his face on documents, signed bank papers with strange numbers, and emails begging for power in return for gold. People started to whisper. Then they shouted. Then they roared. "Traoré is still our president," someone yelled in the market. A crowd gathered. And just like that, the streets of Ouagadougou began to shake, not with fear, but with rising fire in people's hearts. Down beneath the city, hidden in a secret command room, President Traoré stood before a glowing map. Red dots marked Doumbié's soldiers. Green dots showed loyal ones. Major Sankara stood beside him, holding a tablet showing live footage of the palace. Traoré leaned forward. His voice was soft, but every word was like thunder. "Where are we with the distribution of the evidence?" Sankara replied, "Done, sir. Over 5 million people have seen it already. The people are no longer quiet. They know the truth." Traoré nodded. "Good. Now we move to phase 2. Back in the palace, General Doumbié was confused. He had just finished his speech, but something felt wrong. He waited for applause, for cheering from the streets, but there was only silence. No celebration. No marching bands. No citizens waving flags. Only the sound of birds on the palace roof and the distant humming of angry voices. He turned to his soldiers. "Why haven't we received full control of communications?" he asked. One young soldier stuttered, The towers are not responding. Someone's blocking the signal." Doumbié's eyes narrowed. "Who?" No one answered. He clenched his fist. "Find him. Find President Traoré. He couldn't have vanished." But deep down, Doumbié knew. He was chasing a ghost. Far away, in a shadowy location, President Traoré stepped into a small, dim room. Before him sat a group of young officers, men and women from across the nation, smart, loyal, and fearless. "This is our moment," Traoré said to them. "We do not fight with hate. We fight with truth. We do not need blood to win. We need courage." They saluted him. One of them, Captain Aminata, spoke up. "Sir, some of Doumbié's men are beginning to question the mission. They're scared. Many didn't know it was a coup." Traoré looked her in the eyes. "Give them a way out. Offer them mercy and truth. If they surrender, they can come home. But if they fight for betrayal, they will fall alone." In the palace, the mood was changing fast. General Doumbié was pacing. "Where are the backup forces? Why haven't the other battalions joined us?" "Sir," said another officer, voice trembling, "we tried to contact the 2nd and 4th battalions, but they aren't responding." "What do you mean not responding?" "We think they may have switched sides." "Impossible!" Doumbié shouted. But then, boom. A loud explosion shook the sky. Everyone in the palace ran to the windows. They saw military vehicles rolling into the streets. Not firing. Not shooting. Just moving. Surrounding the palace. Not to protect it, but to trap the traitors inside. Back in the underground command room, Traoré stood tall, arms folded. He watched as his plan unfolded like a game of chess. "They surrounded us," said Sankara. "No one leaves that palace until we say so." Traoré nodded. "Send the message." Sankara clicked a button. On every phone screen across the country, a message popped up. "Mobile phone, to all soldiers inside the palace. Lay down your weapons. You have been used. We know your bullets are blanks. This is not your fight. Walk out peacefully and return home. President Ibrahim Traoré." Inside the palace, Doumbié's soldiers stared at each other. "Blanks," whispered one. He opened his rifle. He pulled out a bullet. It looked real, but when he cracked it open, powder poured out. Not gunpowder. Flour. "What is this?" Another soldier dropped his gun in shock. "They tricked us. We've been fighting with flour." Panic spread. Some ran. Some cried. Others sat down, shaking. Their weapons were fake. Their cause was false. Their leader was a traitor. And now, they had to choose. General Doumbié stood in the middle of the grand hallway, alone. One by one, his soldiers dropped their guns and walked away from him. He tried to stop them. "Come back. This is not over. We still have power." But no one listened. They didn't salute him. They didn't look back. They simply left him standing there, a general with no army. Back in the shadows, Traoré whispered to Sankara. "It's time." Sankara nodded. "Should we storm the palace?" "No," Traoré said. "We walk in. Calmly. With peace." He destroyed himself already. He turned to his loyal officers. "Let the people see that we did not need to fight to win. We needed only the truth." As the sun climbed higher, the palace gates opened. And Traoré stepped out of an armored car, dressed in plain clothes. No crown. No army. Only truth in his heart and courage in his eyes. The crowd gathered, stunned. They clapped. They cheered. But most of all, they watched as he walked straight into the palace, toward the man who tried to kill him. The palace that once felt like a place of power now felt like a prison. Walls that stood tall and proud now seemed to close in. And at the center of it all stood General Maurice Doumbié, sweaty, angry, and completely alone. He stood near the long red carpet that led to the main door, listening to the sound of footsteps approaching. Footsteps he feared. Not because of bullets, but because of the truth walking toward him. The palace door creaked open. And in stepped President Ibrahim Traoré. No soldiers behind him. No guns. Only calm eyes, strong steps, and a heart full of fire. He walked slowly as if every step made the building tremble. Doumbié backed away, still holding onto a radio, even though it no longer worked. "Stay back," he barked. "You can't just walk in here." But Traoré didn't stop. He kept walking. Silent. Powerful. Unshaken. When he reached Doumbié, he didn't raise a fist. He didn't shout. He simply said, "Why, Maurice?" That question was like a thunderclap in the general's chest. Doumbié looked away. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Power," he finally whispered. "They promised me the presidency. The French said they would support me if I removed you." Traoré's eyes didn't blink. "And for that," he said softly, "you sold your soul." Just then, Major Sankara walked in, holding a small device. He pressed a button. The screen on the wall came alive. It showed a live camera from the outside. Crowds filled the streets. People stood in markets, at bus stops, on rooftops, holding up their phones, watching every second, watching this very moment inside the palace. Traoré turned to Doumbié. "The world is watching. Your people are watching. What do you want them to remember you for?" Doumbié looked down at his hands. They were shaking. He had nothing. No army. No power. No escape. Only shame. Suddenly, the door behind them opened again. One of Doumbié's last loyal guards burst in. "Sir, the French embassy just called." They say it's over. They're pulling their people out. We've been left alone. Doumbié's mouth dropped open. They promised backup. They lied, the soldier replied, stepping forward with trembling hands. And now the people want blood. I can't stop them. But Traoré raised his hand. Let no blood fall today, he said firmly. This is not revenge. This is justice. He looked to Doumbié and said one final word. It's time. 2 loyalist soldiers entered the room. They didn't carry weapons. Just handcuffs. Doumbié didn't fight. He lowered his head. And as they gently tied his hands, the general who once tried to kill a president became a prisoner of his own soldiers. Outside the palace, people stood in stunned silence. And when they saw Doumbié being led out, head bowed, cuffed, quiet, they cheered. Not for violence. Not for war. But because truth had won. And peace had spoken louder than bullets. Across the city, phones buzzed again. Breaking news. General Doumbié arrested. Coup defeated without bloodshed. President Traoré's secret plans saved the nation. The people reclaimed their country. In homes, mothers wept with relief. In schools, teachers hugged their students. On the streets, even strangers held hands and smiled. Not because they were saved by guns, but because they were saved by wisdom, by courage, and by one leader who refused to give up. Back in the palace, Traoré sat alone for a moment. He looked around at the quiet room. He could still hear echoes of betrayal, but he could also hear the heartbeat of a nation rising again. Major Sankara entered. Sir, he said, the people want to hear from you. Traoré nodded, but he didn't walk to the microphone. He walked to a small wooden table near the window. On it sat an old radio, one his father used to listen to when he was a boy. Traoré picked it up, turned it on, and spoke into it. My dear people of Burkina Faso, his voice echoed from rooftops and radios across the land. I come to you not as a king, not as a hero, but as your son. You have seen how easily one man's greed can nearly tear a nation apart. But today, you also saw how truth, unity, and courage can build it back again. We are not afraid. We are not broken. We are stronger than ever. He paused. Then he added, from this day, let no general forget that power does not come from guns or gold. It comes from the people. The crowd erupted into cheers. Even the clouds above seemed to clear. And from every window, every market, and every heart, came one cry. Long live Traoré. Long live the people. In a quiet cell, Doumbié sat alone. He had once dreamed of wearing the crown. Now he wore silence. He listened to the people chanting. And he realized he never truly understood them. He had tried to lead by force. But Traoré led by faith. As the sun set, painting the sky in gold and fire, a new chapter began in Burkina Faso. Not one of fear or foreign chains, but one of freedom, honor, and hope. And as children fell asleep that night, they dreamed not of war, but of a leader who beat a bullet with a plan, a traitor with the truth, and darkness with the light. The morning after the failed coup was unlike any other. The air smelled fresh as if the wind itself had been cleaned. Birds chirped louder. The sun looked brighter. And the people of Burkina Faso woke up with smiles they hadn't worn in weeks. Something had changed. Something big. Across the country, people gathered in the streets. Not to protest. Not to hide. But to celebrate. Men drummed on plastic buckets. Women danced barefoot on dusty roads. Children waved little flags and ran around, shouting, Traoré! 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 But inside the palace, President Traoré was not dancing. He was working. He sat with his advisors, maps spread out before him. Major Sankara poured tea and handed him a folder. These are the files we recovered from Doumbié's briefcase, he said. Inside were names, secret accounts, and signed papers from French operatives. It was worse than they thought. Traoré stared at the pages. So many lies. So many plans to steal from the country. So many hands in their pockets. But instead of anger, Traoré felt something else. We'll need a full cleanup, said Sankara. Yes, Traoré nodded. But not just of people. Of ideas. of systems, of everything that allowed this to happen. He paused. Then he looked up and added, "Let's give the country back to its people." Later that afternoon, a grand speech was planned. A large stage was built in the center of the capital. Cameras pointed from all directions. Reporters came from around the world. And in front of a sea of faces, old and young, rich and poor, President Traoré stepped up to the microphone. He didn't wear a suit. He wore his army uniform, not to show power, but to show he had fought beside them, that he was one of them. He looked at the crowd and smiled. Then he spoke. "My people." The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. He continued, "We were attacked, not with bombs or tanks, but with lies and betrayal. We were nearly sold to people who wanted to take everything we've built. But we stood strong. We didn't fight each other. We stood together. We didn't use guns. We used truth." He held up one of Doumbié's secret letters. "This is what they planned to use to take our land, our gold, our freedom. But we stopped them. And now we start again." The crowd roared. Traoré wasn't finished. "I want schools in every village. I want food on every table. I want no child to go to sleep hungry again. We will no longer depend on those who never cared for us. No more foreign puppets. No more stolen dreams." He pointed to the sky. "From today we rise, like the sun over Africa." People screamed, clapped, and cried. It wasn't just a speech. It was a promise of a better tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the quiet prison on the edge of the city, General Doumbié sat in a dark cell, staring at a tiny window. He had heard the speech on a small radio. He had listened to every word. And as he sat in silence, he realized the truth. He could have been part of something great. But he chose greed. He had marched into the palace to become king, and left as a lesson. A young soldier passed by the cell. He stopped and looked at Doumbié through the bars. "You tried to steal this country," the boy said, "but we stopped you without even firing a real bullet." Doumbié said nothing. He just nodded. And for the first time in his life, he felt small. Back at the palace, President Traoré walked through the garden behind the main building. He knelt by a small tree. It was just beginning to grow. He planted it 3 years ago when he first became leader. And today, it had its first green leaves. He smiled. Major Sankara came beside him. "Sir," he said gently, "you've saved the country." But Traoré shook his head. "No," he replied, "we saved each other." That night, fireworks filled the sky. But they weren't like the kind fired in war. They were red, green, and gold. The colors of freedom. The colors of hope. Families hugged under the stars. Old men told their grandchildren, "You will remember this day forever." And little boys and girls closed their eyes and dreamed, not of guns and coups, but of truth, unity, and a leader who believed in his people. In the days that followed, Traoré invited village elders to join national meetings. He created a youth council to hear from the young. He passed a law to block foreign companies from owning the country's most precious land. He visited schools and clinics, asking, "What do you need?" And every time he left, he reminded them, "This is your country now. Keep it safe. Keep it strong." Years later, the story of General Doumbié's failed coup was taught in schools. But not just to talk about betrayal. It was told to teach courage, wisdom, and how one man with a clear plan and a brave heart saved an entire nation. And so, from a secret passage beneath the palace, to a radio message heard around the world, to a traitor trapped by his own lies, came a story that would live forever. The story of how a general came to kill a president, but became a prisoner of his own soldiers. And how, in the darkest hour, the light of the people lit the way.